Hello everyone, this is Sean, and I'm going to help you collaborate with others. Okay, these are my rules for collaborating with audio editors and other people that help video editors with their timeline, such as colorists, special effects artists, and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and start with the basics. We're gonna go through this really quick, so bear with me. This is really long-winded, but there's a lot of information to get through. Number one, know your terminology. Please know your film, video, and hopefully after today, your audio terminology. Film and video terminology should be a given. However, if you're not very up on the lingo, make good use of Wikipedia, make good use of Google, make good use of friends, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of good sources out there to know the lingo. I want to go through 6 main definitions today that should help you along. Number 1, 2-pop is basically a 1 kilohertz tone, a sine tone that lasts 2 frames and it actually arrives on your timeline 2 full seconds before your film starts. Why is that important? That basically gives your timeline a sync reference for your collaborators. So just say you export your film out and you send it over to your colorist, you send it over to your visual effects artist, you send it over to your audio editor, and they do their thing, and then you put it back into your timeline, and it says, hey, you should be able to just go and work. Well, one thing that you'll find is that not everybody uses the same NLE as you. Some people use After Effects and Premiere, some people use Final Cut Pro and Motion, and so on and so forth. And it goes down the line. What you need to have is some kind of reference point for sync. And that's what a 2-pop gives you. It gives you that sync point, an audio sync point that everybody has to put their timeline to. And they know exactly where the film starts. On to the next definition, sample rate versus bit depth. Now, sample rate, the best way I can put it is an audio signal taking a single slice of it in time. Kind of like frame rate for a video camera. Basically, a frame rate is you have 30, 60, 120 frames a second, and one of those frames equals that video in 1 portion of a second in time. Well, audio works the same way, except a much higher frequency or much higher sample rate. Typical audio is recorded at 41,000 kilohertz and higher for CDs. Film and video are delivered at 48 kilohertz. A lot of field recorders record at 96 kilohertz and higher. I've seen a lot of pro recorders use 192 kilohertz. Same thing with DAWs with that. Bit depth, though, where you'll actually see in your NLE, you'll see 16-bit, 24-bit, 32-bit. And for audio, when you see, say, 16-bit versus 24-bit, you're basically 24-bit is 256 more times more accurate than 16-bit. And that's why audio editors like myself prefer 24-bit over anything else. What do I mean by it is more accurate? Well, just say the best way I can relate it to is think of a TV that has an old-fashioned knob where you turn it down with a knob, or a receiver, and whenever you turn it up and down, it's a very smooth motion, and whenever you want it up a little bit, you just turn a little bit and you were there where you want. Now most things are notched or use a digital setting. You have 1 through 20, right 1 now, through just 30. Say you have a commercial on and you're at level whatever 10 on your remote, and you want to turn it down, but you turn it down to 9 and it seems to be very whisper quiet. And for commercials, that's fine, but then when your TV comes back on, it's way too quiet. You want something in between that. Well, unfortunately, right now a lot of devices don't give you that accuracy. Well, that's what a higher bit depth does. It doesn't do that on the remote side, but it does do it on the editor side. And so instead of having notch between 9 and 10, you have 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, and so on and so forth. It builds up like that. It becomes a lot more apparent when you have a lot of different signals coming in, and you need to have them at a different level, and you need to be very accurate so it gives you the right sound that you're looking for. Typically, that's mostly handled on the audio editor side. However, having a higher bit depth is always preferred. Next term, we're talking about dB. And what we mean by dB, decibel. In short, Alexander Graham Bell made the measurement of audio. However, he didn't make it a firm measurement. It does vary from device to device. Some devices use one way to measure it, another device uses another way. Decibel means 1/10 of a bell, and it's 1/10 of a measurement. However, one camera will not record sound the same as another camera. They might record on the technical side, but they won't record the measurement of dB as the same. The one thing you do want to know, though, above anything else, is dBFS, or dB full scale. dB full scale is basically when your audio hits all the way up to 0 dB and then starts to clip. You get to that 0 dB, you're going to see red lights flashing, red lines, and then next you know, if your audio goes above 0 dB, you're going to start to hear distortion. Distortion, in short, sucks. Everything is judged by distortion, about how much distortion is there, and if your scene has audio with distortion, it's going to be judged because of that distortion, not because of anything else. And that sucks. And that's just the way it is right now. Next term, LtRt and LoRo, or LoRo. In short, LoRo is a stereo signal. Stereo only, left-right only, and that's what you get. I mean, music CDs are delivered in that, most indie films are delivered in that, and that's okay. What LtRt is left total, right total, and it's basically a matrix stereo surround sound. Or, if you're very familiar with it, it's known as Dolby Pro Logic 2. And it stores the left channel, the right channel. It stores a combination of those two into the center channel. Then you have your matrix surrounds for your 4 and 5 channels. And then you also have your LFE, which is your low frequency enhancement channel. And it's pulled from all of those. That's really, the reason why you should know this is that if you ever want to deliver to, say, an indie festival and you want to start impressing some people, deliver an LtRt so you can get that surround. Most theaters can actually play back LtRt right out of the box. So if they receive a stereo signal in, they'll go ahead and it should automatically process it as Dolby Pro Logic. And that's really, really great if you can get your movie in a theater. Next term is stems. Stems is important to know because it was mainly a musical audio term for the longest time, and then I started dealing with a lot of indie festivals where the editors had to print out or export out the individual tracks. And that's basically what stems are, is individual audio tracks within your editor. You might have multiple videos in your editor and you're all stacked up, lined up and ready to go. Well, stems are basically an export out of each audio track in full, from left to right, from beginning of the timeline to the end of timeline for each audio track. If some audio editor asks you for stems, that's what they mean. Compressor versus limiter. In short, a compressor is like a vise, and like a vise that has springs on the edges. And you say your audio signal is going in and you want to compress down the peaks. Well, it's going to get pressed down, but if it's a signal of certain strength, it's going to press those springs out and it's going to spread it out a little bit further. However, it's going to be controlled. What a limiter is a compressor with a 10-to-1 ratio or higher. Typical limiter has a 20-to-1 ratio. I've seen them go all the way up to 101 ratio. And yeah, I think even some digital ones go up to like 1,000-to-1 ratio, which is unnecessary, but It's been used. The reason why you want to know the difference between compressor and a limiter is if you use a compressor during, say, dialogue outside, and you compress it down a lot, it's going to make the quiet things seem louder. Now, while that's great for whispering, if you make, say, birds in the background or the ambience in the background louder while someone's talking, it's going to be very distracting, and you don't want that to happen. Where for a limiter, it helps it control from peaking on your audio timeline, so that if you need to add a sound effect in there or something else, it gives that little bit of control and prevents you from peaking. Most of the terms can be found on rain.com in their digital dictionary. They might call it their glossary now. Check out rain.com, you can find a lot about their audio terms, and be sure to know them when you talk to audio editors. It's very important. Okay, the second part of the basics, I'm going to go over 3 video terms I think everybody should know, and if they don't know, maybe to look them up, is the difference between color correction and color grading. In my point of view, color correction is getting each shot within a scene with the same lighting color balance. So just say in one scene you have 5 shots, and for whatever reason on your 5th shot you used a different light, and instead of having the normal, you know, 5500 Kelvin rating, it's a 2700 Kelvin rating. Well, basically you have to color correct it to have that same shot look the same as the rest of your scene. And that's the main purpose of that. Color grading is basically after you've done your color correction, you go back through everything again, and then you grade it or change the color or adjust the color of your scenes to make it more dramatic. And that's often done in, I'd say, 99% of all Hollywood movies. They color grade the heck out of them. Anything that's sci-fi usually has blue and orange in them a lot. I mean, you look at Transformers, blue and orange is prominent everywhere. Star Trek, the same thing. If you go on with war movies, a lot of them are using gray and brown to give it kind of a grimy, dungy thing. The next video terms I think everybody should know is the difference between time code and frames per second. Frames per second is actually the recorded frames for video. You know, video cameras typically can record at 24 frames a second, 25 frames a second, 30 frames a second, or they're more technical terms at 2398, 2397, or 2997, and so on and so forth. Time code is basically how your timeline is set up. Your timeline should be set up to match your frames per second setting for your video. However, your time code within your timeline doesn't always match up for your video projects. So just say your time code says, your videos starts at, your first frame starts at 1 second, but the 18th frame. Well, that's not, your first frame is called frame 1 on your camera, but not on your timeline for your NLE. The reason why it's important to know is that typically you want to set up your timeline a bit differently than just butting your video right in the front. And I'll explain more on that in a little bit. The last set of video terms I want to get out of the way, and this will be all for terms, is NLE versus DAW. In short, NLE is what video editors use, DAW is what audio editors use. NLE stands for, of course, non-linear editor. DAW stands for digital audio workstation. For the two different sides, it's the same thing, just with two different purposes. The NLE is dedicated for dedicated for video, and DAW is dedicated for audio. Each one can dabble a little bit in the other, some more than others. Like Sony Vegas was mainly used for audio way back in the day, and then the video portion of it took off. Now we're getting out of the terminology. Let's get into something a little bit further on. And I don't know if we consider this terminology or not, but it's important to know is container versus codec. must understand the difference between a container and a codec. Not all AVIs and MOVs are the same. Basically, a container is the extension of that file. So an example of a container is AVI, MOV, MP4, WMV, MKV, M2TS, TS, and so on and so forth. Those are containers. And basically those contain the format of the video. A codec is actually what forms the encoding, decoding of the video and also gives it the compression. So a efficient codec will give a high compression, low file size. However, it could be a little strenuous on the processor. So most people know of is X264 or H264, Xvid, Divx, Apple ProRes, VP8, Avid's DNxHD, and Mainconcept is well known. You can look these up on Wikipedia. You can find out which containers can actually do what, because certain containers can only work with certain codecs, and certain codecs have certain features over others. Why is this important? Well, just say you want to collaborate with others, you want to have a codec that is frame accurate. And most codecs that are out nowadays are based on, I believe it's called Interframe codecs, where basically it has, for a video to show accurately, it has to look at the frames before and the frames after to compile the current frame. Now, why that sounds a little confusing, that basically makes the compression very effective. However, that's poor for editors in general, or especially for special effects editors and audio editors. We want something frame accurate. We want Intraframe codecs. The top Intraframe codecs, in my opinion, are Apple ProRes, the Avid DNxHD, and DV. Motion JPEG is also a good one, depending on the file size. But Motion JPEG right now, the file sizes are just huge. DV is a lot better. You're going to go down that route. If you want if you want HD, go with Apple ProRes or DNxHD. There are some X264 formats that are going full iframe. Still, that's not compatible with every system out there. I would recommend keeping with the big four or the big three right now. On beyond the basics. This is probably a little more advanced. Maybe not more advanced, but it's important to know. What is Dropbox or Sugarsync or Gobbler or Box.net? In short, they're cloud storage services. Why is that important? Well, in short, you need to find a way to share files between multiple people or if you collaborate. Dropbox is great because you can share a single folder and then everybody can put their files in that and everybody gets updated on that, and it's really nice with that. The only thing with Dropbox is the uploading is sometimes a little slow. It's not horrible, but it doesn't max out your bandwidth. Same thing with the downloading of Dropbox, it doesn't max out your bandwidth all the time. It's simple to use, you put a file on there and it does its thing on its own. You share through the web interface and so on and so forth. Sugarsync works very similarly, it has a different interface, and it gives you a little more free space. I think instead of 2 gigs free, it gives you 5 gigs free. It's really, it's a decent interface, it's just it's a little more robust than Dropbox. Gobbler is something new. They give you a lot of space and they basically give it a per transfer for a month. The only thing I don't like about with Gobbler is that you don't share a folder. You basically pop in email addresses in there and drag and drop files and it sends them to them and they get a link and they download it and they're off and running. Box.net, from what I've used of it, which is very, very little, is similar to Dropbox now. They do have limitations like file size. You can upload, I think it's like 100 megs or 200 megs. You have a max free file space of a gig or 2. But if you have to use something that's free, you find something that works. I would highly recommend investing in a service like Dropbox or Sugarsync or Gobbler to make sure you can send files to your collaborators. Because if you can't send files out to them, it doesn't matter. The next thing I think everybody should know is how to use FTP. FTP, in short, stands for File Transfer Protocol, and it's been around for, I don't know, 2 decades or more, and it's basically how people used to transfer files back and forth between PCs and servers. And it used to be command line where you had to type in a command, copy or transfer this file to remote destination, enter, go, and it would transfer over. Well, now everybody uses a graphical interface. The best graphical interface for FTP right now that is on Mac and PC is FileZilla. FileZilla is an FTP client that you install. It makes it drag and drop, basically. When you install FileZilla, it's going to then ask you for the host that you connect to, a port, and login information. And the host is basically the IP address of the server. The port should usually be default 21, and the username and password is what is provided to you, whoever's hosting the FTP server. Why is this important? Just say you have a 5 GB file, and you don't want to pay for Dropbox, you don't want to pay for Sugarsync, you don't want to pay for Gobbler, and you don't have that kind of space available to you. Well, an FTP server is free. You can set it up on your own PC if you want to go on the hard part, or any kind of web hosting service can use FTP. The one thing that's nice about it is that you drag and drop your file from, say, your desktop over to the side where you're connected to, and it uploads it directly to the server, and then other people can download that from the server as needed. It is kind of archaic compared to Dropbox and Gobbler. However, it does work, it is free, and it's important to know because a lot of host facilities require you to know how to upload and download files. Oh, this is another important one. Number 5, how to zip or RAR a file, and should you split and concat files. Windows users, we're mostly familiar with Windows XP, Windows Vista, and 7. They basically had a zip compression utility built in before XP and Windows 95, and way back then you had to have WinZip or some form of compression utility. The best compression utilities I recommend using, because I don't like the ones that are built into the OS, are 7-Zip. You can get WinRAR, and there's also another one that's popular now called PZip, P-E-A-Z-I-P. And basically you take a file, you right click on it, and say compress. And you have different options between quick and best. I always use best nowadays because the difference between quick and best is very little now. And that way you can shrink your files down to send them across. And what most of those utilities allow you to do is also split them up into, say, sections. Say you don't have a lot of space on your server or Dropbox, and you need to get these files to someone. You can split that up into, say, 100 megabyte files, or 200 megabyte files, or 300 megabyte files, upload them, then have the other person get them, clear them out, do the next set, and so on and so forth. When they put them all in the same folder on their side and unzip them, they'll go ahead and be able to get that single file or the multiple files out of the package of files. Well, I've came across a situation talking about splitting and concatenating a file. Is I was working with another video editor, and he had good luck with splitting and concatenating, and we tested it out with one of the audio files and it worked fine. But then we started doing video files, and he would split it and concatenate it on his side. It would seem fine. So he'd split it, he'd upload it to a server, I would download the files, I would concatenate it on my side here. It would seem to work fine, however the video was corrupt. Whatever has happened, it corrupted the file. I do not recommend splitting and concatenating a file if you can help it. but if you have to, do that with a proper utility like 7-zip, WinRAR, and pzip. Do not do it with just a split concate file. Options for Mac. Mac have a few different options that I recommend. They do have whatever built-in archiver. That again, I don't like for OS X. Pzip's cross-compatible, so you can use that with OS X. You have the unarchiver. Stuffit, I think, is still around, and if you need just a read-only version, you can get the ZipPeg, ZIPEG. And you can find that on zippeg.com. Anyways, so let's go ahead and continue on. Now for the advanced portion, or the, in my opinion, most important stuff. The number one thing I think is most important when you're collaborating with others is naming all your tracks, video and audio. By giving them meaningful names. Good examples are, camera 1, scene 1, shot 1, etc., etc. You don't have to name everything, the individual clips or segments within that track. However, if you name the track, saying call it camera 1, the other one is camera 2, or if you only have one camera, you do scene 1, scene 2, and scene 3. This will help your collaborators understand what those tracks are when they receive them, besides video 1, video 2, audio 1, audio 2. That's absolutely horrible. It tells nothing about what those tracks are. You want to give them meaningful names. Number 7, setting up your timeline correctly in your editor. To do this, I always recommend setting it up at 59 minutes, 58 seconds. Simple enough. 59 minutes, 58 seconds. The reason why this is that you can then butt your 2-pop at the very beginning of your timeline, and giving that 2-second window. Once it hits 2 seconds, boom, you're at the 1 hour mark, and then your film starts. Simple enough. It gives that, and also when you start doing your the next part, what we're talking about is the timecode burn-in window. It'll actually say 1 hour and then 0 minutes, 0 seconds, and so on and so forth right there. If you start your time frame at 00 and then you do your 2-pop, and then you're 2 seconds in before you start your film, your time code is going to be off by 2 seconds, and you don't want that to have happen. You want to be as accurate as possible throughout your whole film. The next part is making your timecode burn-in. Each NLE has a different way of doing it. Vegas basically has a little plug-in called timecode or timecode burn-in. You put that in, you tell it where to start at, and boom, it starts right there for that particular video. I usually put it on the master track or a sub-master track for the video. That way it does the timecode burn-in for the entire length of the film or entire length of the project. That way you understand when you export it out, that's what it's going to have in it. And that way you can mute it or bypass it, and it'll just disappear when you're ready to export the final project. Make sure with the TC burn-in, it matches the frame rate of your project. So if you have a 24p project, make sure your timecode plugin or the timecode burn-in matches that. Do not have a 24p project and then set your timecode burn-in to 30 frames a second or 29.97. That will screw everything up. The reason why timecode burn-in is so needed, I guess so required, is when you talk to, say, your audio editor, or you're talking to your colorist and you don't like something about a certain scene, instead of saying, on this one scene that looks like this, it's around that time, you can just give the timecode timecode number and it says, hey, at 24 seconds, 30 frames, or 24 minutes, 10 seconds, and 5 frames, this audio really sucks. Or at 5 minutes, 5 frames, this special effect could be better. You're giving a very accurate number, and it's something they can look up on their video and know exactly what you're talking about. There's no guessing games, and that is vital. If you're guessing around, it could be several revisions before you get what you want, and no one wants to have to do 10 revisions to fix one small thing. Next, I think this is pretty important. Some people know how to do it, some people don't, is understand how to export XML and OMF. XML is basically the data that says where each clip is on a timeline, and XML is typically universally accepted into any NLE. Most DAWs do accept a different version of it called OMF. Luckily, OMFs typically include the actual clips themselves, the audio itself, which is really nice, so that a person doesn't have to, transfer a bigger portion of the project over. Instead of having to transfer all the audio files over, they'll only transfer the audio files over that include in the OMF or XML part of it. If you export OMF, be sure to include what they call handles, or 5-second extras. The handles basically give the audio editor an extra little budge on each clip to adjust, just in case you need to fade in or grab a little soundbite for noise reduction. It's very important that you don't set that to no handles. If you set it to no handles and there's a problem, the audio editor has very little leeway to do what he needs to do. Each project has its own settings. Audio-wise, you want to have no less than 24-bit 48K. Most video will be recorded on camera at 48K 16-bit. Now, this is not a compatibility problem. You can always upscale, and it doesn't affect the quality one way or another. However, if you do downscale, it can affect the quality of the audio. What you always want to do, though, is set your project at least 24-bit 48K. Some NLEs can go up higher. Some go up to 96K. I think Xvid goes up to 192K. It's not needed for that, but 48K 24-bit is vital. If you set it to that, then everyone will be on the same page. This is industry standard for Blu-ray. It's also industry standard for DVD for the work prior to export, and it's used for everything for exporting on the web as well. If you're working with a new composer, make sure your composers know the project specifications as well. Make sure he understands it's 24-bit 48K. A lot of composers that are new or are part of a band are always used to setting it to either the highest what they can get, which it could be 96K, which isn't necessary, or they set it to 44.1, which is CD quality, and they don't have to do any conversions. For video, it has to be 48K to make life easier. That's about it. I hope this helped some videos editors out there to understand some rules to follow by for collaboration. I'll go ahead and put everything I have on my little summary sheet in the description of the video. I'll put this on YouTube so everyone else in the world can learn. If there's anything that's inaccurate, I do apologize. This is from my own personal experience, and a lot of this is pulled from the hip. If you have any questions, obviously you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll do what I can for you. But to give you a quick summary, the basics included, know your terminology. You got your audio, you got your video terminology, containers versus codecs, using Dropbox FTP, now to zip, RAR. Then the advanced stuff is basically naming your tracks, going through setting up your timeline correctly, understand how to create your own TC burn-in window or TC burn-in for your timeline, and exporting XML, and understanding what your project settings should be set out for audio. All I have to say is thank you for watching, thank you for taking the time. It's taken me more time than I wanted to get this to you guys, but you guys were owed this for the longest time, and I'm glad I was able to get it finished. Anyways, thanks, and I will see you another time for more information. Peace.